Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning. For those of you who are here the first time, my name's Jim Wilson, and I give a monthly talk here at the GBF. My background is in the Korean Zen tradition, but I also studied Theravada under a Cambodian monk, and for a time Dzog Chen, and just about everything I could get my hands on Dharma-wise. I practiced as a monastic and as a lay person, and that's about it in a nutshell. Do people have any Dharma questions before I begin my talk today? Thank you for coming, incidentally, on the most annoying day of the year. So yet another opportunity to practice equanimity. For me, it's the most annoying day. Every year around this time, when you push the clock forward, I go, "What is this? Why are we doing this?"
Not a question, but just to share that it was a year ago this week that I first started coming here, and my gratitude to your teaching and to this group. And I'm remembering that it must have been a high dukkha time a year ago, if it brought me here. And I'm just grateful to be part of this and for the teaching that I've gotten here.
Happy anniversary. Thank you. So, that's wonderful. What I'd like to talk about today and probably next month as well is relating to a spiritual teacher. Because I think that's a topic that's of ongoing interest to Western Buddhist practitioners. What does it mean to have a spiritual teacher? How do you relate to a spiritual teacher? There's a lot of different models and a lot of confusion about what to expect from a spiritual teacher. It's that role, the role of spiritual teacher or mentor or guide or whatever it has been absent in the West for a long time. So we don't have any historical references to build a foundation for that. So it's not something that comes easily to us. So I think it's worth exploring. There's an interesting discourse in the Long Discourses collection where Shariputra is speaking to some other disciples, and the great Jain teacher Mahavira has just died. So the Buddha and Mahavira were contemporaries. They lived very close to each other. And Mahavira was maybe 15 years older or something like that. And there was a lot of ebb and flow between the two communities. There were a lot of the early converts to Buddhism were from the Jain community, and in the Jain sutras there are Buddhists who go over to the Jain community. But what happened after Mahavira died is that his community split, and there was great dissension and argument among his followers over what was the correct teaching, what Mahavira actually taught, and it splintered very rapidly, almost immediately upon the death of Mahavira. And Shariputra is very concerned about this, that he doesn't want that to happen to the Buddhist community. So the dialogue and the discussion is, how can we pass on the Dharma to the next generation without that happening? We don't want our community to descend into that kind of factionalism and dispute. And Shariputra's answer was to generate a list of categories that the disciples would memorize. So the rest of the sutra is a list of categories. And that's why, incidentally, he's considered in some ways the founder of Abhidhamma and Buddhist philosophy and psychology, which is a lot about, 4 this is 5 that's, 6 this is 3 that's, 8 this is, it was Shariputra's attempt to create a mechanism for passing on the Dharma whole. So the reason I bring that up is because what we're talking about when we're relating to a spiritual teacher, we're talking about passing on the Dharma. How does someone pass that on to the next generation? So from the very beginning, that's been all the way back to Shariputra, that's been a topic of concern. How do we do this? The Dharma is not a personal possession. The Dharma is not an acquisition. It's not our private property. It's something that we hold in trust for the next generation. And we receive it from the previous generation. So how to do that? And if you look at it from, if you look at it from a macro level, I see that 3 large-scale means that Buddhism developed for passing on the Dharma. And one of them I called where's my notes? So one of them I call the corporate model. There's 3 models: the corporate model, the royal model, and the lineage model. So the corporate model is that the Dharma is passed on in the corporate body of the monastic sangha. It's a very important mechanism for passing on the Dharma. If you pass on the Dharma by becoming a member of this corporate body, and you live a certain kind of life, and in a sense that is the Dharma. So members of the monastic sangha often refer to the Dharma as Dharma Vinaya. So Vinaya are the rules of conduct within the monastic sangha. So the Dharma Vinaya. And the great virtue of this mechanism is that it has an inbuilt check on eccentric teaching, or an eccentric interpretation or a weird interpretation that an individual might come up with. So the rest of the corporate body is there to say, no, that's not really, what this means. That's not really, how we understand this teaching. That's, the 4 Noble Truths are, really this, not that. The difficulty with this model is that the corporate body tends to, as corporate bodies do, tends to preserve only those teachings which support their existence. And they tend not to preserve those teachings or pass on those teachings which are either antagonistic to their existence or indifferent to their existence. So a good example is the Japanese Buddhist scholar Mizuno did an analysis of the dialogues, the Pali Canon. And 80% of the dialogues are addressed, over 80% are addressed to monastics, directly to monastics. So, and then there's some which are addressed to everybody, and then there are a very small percentage, which are addressed to lay people. But the picture you get of the Buddha is that he was a wanderer. He wandered around India, and all these people, came to him and spoke to him. That can't be the right distribution of percentages for the talks he gave. Just the people coming to him and asking him questions. So what is preserved in the canon is a group of dialogues that was of interest to a particular corporate body. And they had the energy and the time and the talent and the skill to record, to record these. I'm not talking about a conspiracy. It's natural that they would, preserve what was of interest to them, So already, very early, you sort of see that the Dharma becomes weighted by the self-interest of the corporate body. Are there questions about this? Does this make sense? Sure.
Is this view anathema to a lot of Buddhist teachings that we only have a portion of the canon and maybe a lot of it was lost because of this?
That's an interesting question. I don't know whether it is or not. The Buddha taught for 40 years, and even though the Buddhist canon is enormous, if you consider that he gave a talk almost every day for 40 years, what we have is just a small portion of the talks that he actually gave, and I think on that basis that should be a non-controversial claim. But who knows? Somebody might get upset about it. Another model that Buddhism has developed is I call the royal model. It's like a royal succession. And people have this position, and in some traditions they actually refer to the person who holds this position as a throne holder. And they're invested, and they have, they go through a pattern of investiture which is very similar to that of what happens in royal succession. The virtue of this model is that the person who is designated as the successor receives an incredible amount of education and study in the Dharma. I mean, they become like a walking CD-ROM of the Dharma. It's really amazing the amount of if you've met one of these people, the years of devote from quite young. It's the same kind of thing that the successor to a political position in a royal line will be taught statecraft from a very young age, in the hope that when they succeed to the throne, they will be skilled, in the political realm. Similarly, using this model, using this comparison, someone's designated, they're taught from a very young age all about the Dharma. It's really amazing. They become a living, a living presence of the Dharma. The drawback of this, of course, is that it tends to inevitably merge state and Dharma. It's too tempting. State and Dharma merge. There's many examples of this. Like the Tendai Buddhism in medieval Japan would be a primary example where they became a very important political force, and the Dharma became a distant second interest. To them. So you can see this cycle happening in Buddhist history. Within these kinds of organizations. So each one of these models has strength and weaknesses. And then the third model is the lineage model. Incidentally, these models aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. And transmission you'll see in a lot of Vajrayana traditions and of course Zen. It's very prominent. But the difference between the lineage and the royal model is that lineage doesn't necessarily mean that you have a certain position within a hierarchy. That's the difference. But the idea is that there's a succession. The Dharma is passed on from individual to individual to individual, and you can trace this lineage back to the fountainhead of the Dharma, the Buddha. In Zen, in the Zen tradition, people actually chant the names of the succession. It's called Kechimaku. And the belief is that lineage establishes authenticity. So that you have that personal connection. It's not just abstract. You have this personal connection back to the source. The great virtue of this model is that it allows for renewal as political and social conditions change. because somebody who receives transmission and succession in a lineage is viewed as authentic. If they want to change certain kinds of procedures or certain kinds of forms, they can do that. Like a really good example of that would be Ikkyu, Zen Master Ikkyu in Japan, I think in the 1400s. He's credited with establishing tea ceremony as a path, like as a discipline, as a spiritual discipline. And there are many other things that are attributed to Ikkyu, like the development of rock gardens and certain poetic forms, that kind of thing. And he was able to do that because he had received this badge of authenticity, so he could say, well, this old form isn't working, it's stale, it doesn't fit this time, so we're going to present the Dharma this way. It's in other words, it's more flexible. The lineage model is more flexible than the corporate model or the royal model. The great drawback is that it tends to overemphasize the importance of the individual. And at times the individual looms more important than the Dharma itself. And so the Dharma can take a second place. It also can lead to very eccentric interpretations and sort of a distorted presentation, and there's no particular mechanism to check that. There's no particular way for someone to come along and say, well, I don't think that's really true, and then the response is, well, I have the lineage, so it is true. Are there questions about this? This is what I call a macro view.
I'm just curious, historically, in those cultures, these eccentric views tend to then be publicly discredited, and then the school gets smaller and smaller and whittles away?
Yeah, that happens. A good example of that would be Dainichi Nonen, who was a Zen master in the 1200s. In Japan. He was an extreme iconoclast and very abrasive, and Dogen was appalled. But he caused quite a stir, and he got a lot of followers because he was evidently quite charismatic. But eventually, the school that he founded simply evaporated because. Other teachers wouldn't support it or that kind of interpretation.
Yeah. I'm assuming historically that these different approaches have coexisted side by side.
Uh-huh.
So you have one community with one approach and one community with another. Mm-hmm. And there's also been quite a lot of friction between these various communities as to how Buddhism is being interpreted and presented to the public. Sure.
The Dharma debate is an important aspect of Buddhism from the very beginning. And one of the topics of debate is how do you pass on the Dharma? And so there were discussions about this. Does in fact lineage provide authenticity? From the very beginning, there have been those who say, there's no guarantee of that. They've disagreed with that. Does the corporate body of the monastic sangha, guarantee the full presentation of the teaching, so that there have been discussions about that too. Sure, and I think one of you notice there's a model missing. It's a democratic, a democratic form. It's not part of the. There are democratic forms within the Vinaya. For example, if a monk violates a rule, the sangha. Of which he is a part, is asked, 3 times, whether or not they have repented sufficiently, and so it hinges on their reaction, which is a democratic procedure. In other words, the abbot doesn't get to decide; the sangha collectively decides whether or not the monk is reinstated. So that feeling is not completely absent, but we have grown up in a culture, in a society in which certain kinds of organizational procedures are, you see them everywhere. For example, that I can raise my hand and ask a question, or I can call for a vote, or, and we have a certain expectation that organizations will have that component somewhere, somewhere. And so it'd be interesting to see as the Dharma comes to the West whether that notion can be absorbed, or maybe Thich Nhat Hanh suggested that the Sangha might have to develop, in a different direction, entirely to bring in those kinds of procedures. Did somebody else?
Yes, I'm wondering where we are today. For example, what pervades in the United States now in terms of all of us. Which tradition are we, and you personally, for example?
Me personally? Well, I believe in the royal model, and this is my throne. I believe in the royal model. Where's my crown? I'm kidding. Just, right. A lot of what I'm going through is to try and provide a context so that when you approach a Buddhist teacher, you can do so with some understanding of where their tradition is coming from. One thing that so that you won't misunderstand why they're proceeding in the way they're proceeding. This is a lot of this is informative. But where we are today I don't really know the situation in Europe very well, but just speaking about the United States, monasticism just doesn't seem to be attractive to Westerners. And my observation is that Westerners don't get monasticism. That's true not only for Buddhism, but it's also true for Orthodox Christian monasticism. It's either Catholic or Eastern Orthodox. It's very fringe. Because our culture is so embedded in the idea of acquisitiveness, and that asceticism and renunciation is very bizarre. And so I'm not saying that monasticism won't establish itself in the West at some time, but I think it will be a struggle. It really runs against the trend of our society. So but I'm not sure. Lineage seems to be important to people in the sense that people want credentials. So there's that, but it's very fluid right now, and I'm not sure what's going to come out of all of this.
But all of this is talking about institutional-wise
right.
Sort of. When you get down to the individual.
Right. So let's go to the micro level. But like I say, I mentioned this macro view because as you explore the Dharma, if you go to a monastic, for example, why have they become a monastic? Other than at some level they find that life attractive, but at another level they believe that that's the way to authentically pass on the Dharma. So you need to understand that when you approach a monastic, that they have that point of view. Or if you approach a lineage holder, what does that mean that they're a lineage holder? That means that they believe that having that lineage and having that documented, for example, is verification of authenticity. So that's their understanding, and they're teaching from that. And I think it's important for students to understand that relationship.
The Zen Center is fairly influential in the Bay Area.
Right.
I've never understood, are they a monastery?
No.
The people who live there, have they taken any vows more than I will take? I don't understand. When they put on their stuff, are they monks?
Well,
or do they still have sex?
It's really confusing, and this is one thing that really needs to be sorted out in the West. I'm sorry, I have to do a little historical segue to clarify why it's confusing. During the Meiji Restoration in Japan, which was in the late 1800s, is that? Yeah, 1860s. There was a brief period of strongly anti-Buddhist activity on the part of the Japanese government. And they wanted to, Shinto would be, the religion, and Buddhism would be suppressed. And it was very intense for a while, but Buddhism was too much a part of the fabric of Japanese culture for it ultimately to be successful. But during the period of strong anti-Buddhist activity, one of the things the Meiji Restoration did was order that all monks and nuns grow their hair, get married, and be good citizens, including being draftable. And this was resisted by every single sect of Japanese Buddhism. They signed petitions, they appealed to the government, But ultimately the government won out, and most of the monastics did get married, and there were, after the anti-Buddhist activity subsided, then there was the wave of nationalism. There was never a counter-reformation, to this, and that's one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons why in Japan you have this institution called lay monks. It was their attempt in that political context to compromise, so that you could take some extra vows, But the reason it's, in my opinion, the word monk in a Buddhist context should only be applied to someone who is taking the 250 precepts, of traditional monastic Buddhism. Otherwise, it just gets, just confusing. There are plenty of other words you can use to describe, someone who takes the 48 Bodhisattva precepts, or the 16 precepts, or the this or the that, because, if somebody says, I'm a monk, in the entire Buddhist world, the assumption is that you're living by the Vinaya, the traditional Vinaya. It's only in Japan is that not the case, and so that's the source of the confusion. And my pitch in the West is that we need to agree on our vocabulary, and the simplest solution is a monk is someone who lives by the Vinaya. The Vinaya means that a monk takes 250 precepts, and a nun takes 330, and lives that life.
Would that be true of the Dalai Lama? He always said he's a monk.
Yes, that's right. He's a very orthodox monk. He goes by the Sarvastivada Vinaya. Actually, I think it's the Mula Sarvastivada Vinaya, but it's a very traditional monastic life. The Gelug order of Tibetan Buddhism is strongly committed to monasticism. In that sense, it's interesting that the Theravada tradition and the Gelug tradition are very similar in their belief that the corporate body is the best way to pass on the Dharma. So even though Tibetan Buddhism is Vajrayana and all that sort of thing, and the Theravada rejects the Vajrayana and that sort of thing, leaving that minor consideration aside, the form in which they pass on the Dharma is virtually identical. The life of a Gelug monk and the life of a Theravada monk are almost indistinguishable. So it's very interesting.
Is celibacy part of it? Because isn't Thich Nhat Hanh married?
No, Thich Nhat Hanh is not married.
Oh, I didn't know.
No, his rule is the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya, which is derived from Chinese sources. But all these different Vinayas, very minor differences. They're So no, he's never been married. In fact, it's interesting to watch him. Over the years that he's taught in the West, he's become more and more strongly committed to the monastic form. And in fact, last month in Korea, he announced a reform of the Vinaya. It was a very cute talk, because he said, well, I can't go back to Vietnam, they won't let me. That would have been my first choice, to announce the monastic reform. And I can't go to China because the state controls religion there, completely, so you can't announce a reform there, without getting state permission. And I can't. And he said I could announce it in France, but France isn't really a Buddhist country. There's 1% of the population is Buddhist. So he chose Korea because there are a lot of practicing monastics in Korea today. The monastic sangha is still very very functional, in Korea. And the reform that he, which is, you can read it at www.plumvillage.org, I think that's it, consists of things like what to do with cell phones and the internet and automobiles and all those kind of technological innovations, because the monastic precepts are very detailed. When I took them, I remember going whoa. I was really, really quite surprised. There's a whole group of precepts, maybe 12 or 15, about how to cross a river, which in northern India, where there's a river, every few blocks, that certainly made a lot of sense, but during my 6 years as a monastic, that actually never impinged on my life, And so Thich Nhat Hanh offered this monastic reform because he said, there's all this information about how to cross a river or how to do this or how to do that. Or it says, but there's no information about what do you do on the internet. What does a monk or a nun do on the internet to stay focused and to stay, what are the parameters? How would you apply the Vinaya to that kind of situation? I think it's very interesting. I really applaud the effort. I mean, I don't know whether it will take or not, but I think that it's a really a wonderful direction to go. And he's had decades of experience as a monastic, so I hope that it will be looked at seriously. And that it bears some kind of fruit. So. Other questions or comments? Hi, Roger.
Especially for being that late. Maybe we should also mention that in Japan, the Shin Buddhist tradition is opposed to the idea of monasticism and has been since its founding. Shinran, who lived in the 1200s, practiced as a Tendai monk for a number of years, 15 or 20 years, and said it's just not working. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm just in the same position as I was, and my problem is I'm trying to enlighten myself. I'm trying to work on myself, and that's like trying to lift myself up with my bootstraps. He didn't say it in that quite in that way because he didn't have bootstraps in Japan in those days. But that's kind of thing that I'm trying to purify myself. Everything I do is ego-based, and so I just can't get out of it. So I just have to give up and accept the compassion and wisdom and embrace of Buddha Amida. And as a result, there's no point in my trying to say I would get great virtue by being a monastic. And so I get married, and he caused a great scandal because he got married. The other, quite a number of monks had ladies on the side, or rather they'd be up on the mountain and then the lady was down the bottom of the mountain, they'd go down on weekends and back up. but that wasn't happening. So there is a strong tradition, which in the Meiji, of course, the Shin Buddhists were the ones who said, well, of course we should get married. A strong tradition to say monasticism doesn't work because it's ego-based.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. So, the place of lay people in Buddhism has been an issue from very early. So, if you read the Vimalakirti Sutra, the Srimala Devi Sutra, or even the Lotus Sutra to a certain extent, I'm thinking of the Dragon King's Daughter section. Raises the issue of what is the status of a layperson? Can a layperson become fully enlightened? Can they fully practice the Dharma? That sort of thing. But that's a little bit of a segue from the focus of my talk. So maybe someday we'll do a talk about lay practice, versus monastic practice. So I'd like to move from the macro level, though, to the micro level. By that I mean there are certain types of teachers. And one of the things is, as you explore the Dharma, one of the things you might ask yourself is, what do I want to get? What kind of information do I want to get? Because that will help determine, the kind of teacher that you want to relate to. So, one kind of teacher I call the casual teacher, the casual friend. Anytime you sit down with somebody and you say, "Oh, the Four Noble Truths are this," or you hear from somebody, that, the Buddha believed we're all suffering. Isn't that a bummer? Or there's a lot of, it's not acknowledged, but I think it should be acknowledged. There's this casual transmission of the Dharma that takes place. When we get up from here. And we go out there, and people are talking about this and that, or I heard this Dharma talk by somebody, and he made this point, which I thought was really insightful. That's a transmission. Even if you don't have an official title, or or a position, or you're not a throne holder, or or like that. There's a lot of this kind of I don't know exactly the word for it. It's just bubbling around. And that's an important aspect of teaching. People hear about the Dharma, and so friends, acquaintances, the internet, more and more people are getting their initial information about topics by, especially kids. They hear about something or they read it in a book, and then they zoom online, they do a Google, and they're off and running. The internet is wonderful, and it's also really weird because there's no way for first timers to sort through a complete crapola and genuine presentations. It all looks the same, but still, that's a factor. So introductions to the Dharma are often done at this level, So every one of us is a transmitter of the Dharma to the next generation in that sense, in that informal sense of, that's one of the meanings of good Dharma friends, and it shouldn't be underestimated. It's a really important aspect, Another is books, for some of us, we get a lot of our Dharma from books, so, and that's a transmission. That's a transmission of the Dharma as well, so. I'm asked fairly often what would be a good introductory book to the Dharma, and I often respond with Thich Nhat Hanh's The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching, for example, or Walpola Rahula's What the Buddha Taught, and then the feedback I get is that people, go and buy that, and that helps to deepen their understanding. And the virtue of books is that, and I think the reason people like them is that they can go at their own pace. They can mark a page and come back to it. They can put it on the shelf for a week and then go back to it. the weakness of a book is that books can't clarify what they mean. They're a little stupid that way. Like a person, like if a person is giving a Dharma talk about the Four Noble Truths and you don't understand something, there's an opportunity to say to the person, well, I don't see why you say that, or I don't see why that follows. But if you're reading a book and something's not clear, the book is just sort of there. It's not. And also, a book can't defend itself from, from somebody who twists the meaning. So there's a weakness there. But moving to a more recognizable form of teaching, one important role is the Dharma professor. Dharma professor. That's a kind of teacher. There's the college mode. We have a Dharma professor right here. It's a very good one. A Dharma professor is a transmitter of information, a living transmitter of information. And that's what you'll get in colleges most of the time. Is the Dharma professor. This can be extremely valuable, to people. The Dharma professor. They pass on information. The strange thing about the Dharma professor is that they're often not connected or embedded in the Dharma. Like if you go to a comparative religion class, the professor might pass on information about the Dharma, but they themselves are not practitioners. And so there's often there's a gap, between the information they give and their life experience. There's often a kind of it sometimes lacks juice, or passion or commitment, that kind of thing. But it can be an excellent entry, to the Dharma, for many people, the Dharma professors.
That, of course, is partly, really mostly because the academic approach to a religion is still stuck in the notion of objectivity, something that I've been opposed to and been criticized for being involved in things. But on the other hand, it is less threatening because the students don't feel they have to believe anything.
Right. So it's like if you take music, if you take a music history course from someone who's neither a performer nor a composer, there's a gap. If you take a music history course from somebody who is a performer or a composer, you'll notice the difference. There's a whole feeling tone that's different from it. Another kind of teacher is what I call the minister or the preacher, and they're experts at exhortation, and they're committed to the Dharma, but they're not necessarily informed about the Dharma. It's very interesting, they can be very, very inspiring, and in their own life, as an example, they can demonstrate the Dharma, in their life. But in response to questions you may have about the Dharma, they may not be able to be very responsive. And so there's a kind of, as our society has become more complex, there's kind of a separation. Yeah.
Just to follow up on what Roger said from a sort of one step further away from the Dharma, but it seems to me that we are slightly moving away from a perspective that reductionist, analytical, the scientific, logical, positivist method is the sole source of truth, is both necessary and sufficient to find out the total truth about existence and to guide us. So, for example, in my own area now, which I'm part of in management and spirituality, which is still normally long very much, but one of the things that is normally done in classes where people attempt to teach this now is periods of reflection, meditation, contemplation, retreats, though without an alliance to a specific body of rules and regulations and hierarchy, such as you have described. Though that's often explored as alternatives, but not prescribed as
Another example, and this is one of my favorite, kind of in response to your question where I'm at, this is kind of my personal ideal, and I call it the sage, and it combines the professor and the with the commitment part, sort of in place, it's the sage is generally someone who lives a lay life, and they may in fact be a professor, at an institution, but what distinguishes the sage is they have a love of learning. They have a love of learning. They delight in the subject that they're teaching, and you can see it. It inspires them, and their enthusiasm inspires you. I would look for this kind of person. I would really look for this kind of person. So that. Let me just finish this. I've been fortunate enough to, have associated with a number of these kinds of people. And if they can't answer a question, they're delighted that you've raised a question that they can't answer because it gives them an opportunity to do more research. You see, so, and they have this very spacious, spacious mind, and they're enthusiastic about passing on because it's their favorite subject, and so if you are also interested in it, it's just like this bright light goes on.
I'm going to ask you to wrap because we have to have a few minutes for announcements, and we all have to hold the newspaper today. It's kind of a busy day.
Okay. But so I'll wrap it up with the sage. I'm glad I got to mention the sage.
You're a sage.
Thank you. So I'll continue more on this next month. But the closing comment I want to make is that one of the reasons I think people are confused about how to find a teacher in the Dharma is because they're confused about what it is that is being taught. That's not clear. So if you are looking for a music teacher, you're pretty clear about what you want to learn. And if you are looking for a sports coach, you're fairly clear about the results that you want and what you want the coach to be able to do. But in terms of a Dharma teacher, I think it's what is it that I'm looking for? And what you're looking for is someone who understands the following, that the Dharma is the path to the cessation of sorrow by awakening to the deathless and the unborn. Okay, so if that's clear, it doesn't really matter whether they're a professor or a sage or an exhorter. If that's clear, they understand the overall trajectory of the Dharma. That's what the Dharma is about. And I hope that we will all soon awaken to the deathless and unborn and save all sentient beings from suffering. Thank you. Was that quick enough?
That's the hardest part about being a facilitator. Also, I forgot to ask us to introduce ourselves by first names, which is our custom to. I'm Paul.
Snake. Mike.
Jim.
George.
Nick. Kay. Carl. John.
Jack.
Will.
Bill.
Steve.
Jim.
Paul. Raphael. Clint.
Marty.
David.
Roger.
Lee.
Okay, and Kay's our host today. Do you have any host-like announcements for me?
First of all, Is there anybody here for the first time? Probably not. Okay. Second, just a reminder that we have a donor wall out there, and it's just a donation is $5, and that's for all activities, including the event for this beautiful space. So please put your donation in there. If you can give more than $5, that would be greatly appreciated. If you can't, then give whatever you can. Again, after this session, we'll have a refreshment and some social time. And I understand that we'll also be forming newsletter today, so please stay around and help if you. Thank you.
Michael's not a victim of daylight savings time. I mean, I don't know.
I hear activity out there.
You're right. This is the most annoying day.
Worse than fall.
Every day is the most annoying day. You're right.
There's a couple flyers out there for a room for rent. A gay Buddhist who comes to this sangha occasionally left some out there. I told him I'd print that out. And also there's some applications out there for the Spirit Rock Residential Retreat. How many people other than me have been to the Spirit Rock Residential Retreat? It's really
Who's running it?
same people, Arena Wiseman and Eric Colvig. They are the two who've been running it for about 10 years. And it's a 5-night retreat. And it's basically sitting, walking meditation with a Dharma talk every day and an occasional meeting with the teacher. It's not really as aesthetic as you would think because it's just so gorgeous up there. Every room is a private room and the food's to die for. So
it's Bruein Buddhism.
It's Bruein Buddhism.
Bruein is not encouraged.
It's Bruein Buddhism at its best. Okay. Any other announcements?
Excuse me. What is that?
Thank you.
That is June 6th through 11th. We registered the evening of June 6th. I don't know what day of the week it is.
Friday.
Friday, thank you. And then usually we break on the last day after lunch.
I think it's in the newsletter that notice there's a call for someone who might want to volunteer to be potluck coordinator. Because there's a lot of people interested in doing that, but getting it organized.
Yeah, there is one coming up too.
Yes, the first Saturday of May. I forget which day of May that is, but it'll be
in the newsletter.
There's a little announcement.
And give a pitch for the hike.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, it's real interesting. I don't know if you guys read the last Sunday paper. Besides all the news about the award or act, there was a little thing about Point Reyes that said this is the most beautiful time of the year in Point Reyes, and Point Reyes is the best place for wildflowers, specifically Chimney Rock, which is where this hike will be. It's the annual GBF hike to Chimney Rock, and they expect a lot of wildflowers. It's going to be a potluck, so bring something you can share. It's kind of like a picnic. We might go to the lighthouse afterwards. It's a long drive. The hike itself is not that long. It's a couple of miles, but it's a long drive out there, so it's an all-day thing. So if you prepare, if you have like a late afternoon commitment, you really shouldn't go. And we'll be carpooling out there.
It's a Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Saturday. It's really a delightful, beautiful place. It gets a little blustery there sometimes, so you might want to bring a coat.
When is it? What's that?
Well, I forget. It's in the newsletter.
I think it's the last
I'll remember when the day shows up, so I'll be there.
Okay. So,
Paul.
Yeah, Lee.
Speaking of volunteers, we also have a need for a telecommuter volunteer. We have a phone answering thing that we are paying for, which has an announcement on it, which includes the possibility of leaving a message for a callback. We generally get maybe, I'd say, a couple of people a week, maybe 3, who would like to have a callback, and at this point, nobody calls them back. So it's something that can be done in the privacy of your own home without moving from your bed, actually, or your meditation cushion. And there's the simple instructions for how to dial and it's an answering machine service basically, or voicemail. So if there's somebody who would be willing to do that, I can give you the information on doing it. Okay, see me afterwards.
we close in a circle, and Jim, you want to lead us in a close?
May all sentient existence be well and happy. May all sentient existence be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May good fortune fill all the days of all the lives of all sentient existence. May all sentient existence dwell forever in the limitless realm of the ever-present peaceful heart and serene mind.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.